Morning. Today we're looking at special, and the title is What's Your Special? When we are not identifying as the self, when we are not being who we identify as who we think we are, and our sense of identity comes out of the psychological self. Most people that I've spoken to on this subject, which is a lot, have somewhere in there the idea that they're not good enough. The idea that perhaps something is wrong with them, or that they haven't got all the software, or that basically they're not good enough in some way. Now, this thought more than likely arose in their childhood, and more than likely arose out of some kind of traumatic event that happened. Sometimes the events that create this first thought, I'm not good enough, don't have to be particularly traumatic. Often they are, but they don't have to be. So something happens. You don't get picked for the team. Oh, I'm not good enough. Your brother can climb to the top of the tree, but you can't. Oh, I'm not good enough. Your sister wins the dancing competition, and you don't. I'm not good enough. For me, as I said yesterday, I got sent away to boarding school when I was 6 years old, and I made that mean that I wasn't loved and that I wasn't good enough. That's why I wasn't loved. That's why I was sent away. A mystery. But that was the thought that I birthed at that moment. And then we look for other explanations or other events that we give that explanation. Oh, I'm not good enough. And it starts to gather momentum, and it becomes a kind of default place that we go when we don't fulfill our own expectations. And then that becomes who we're being that we are. And who we're being that we are starts to give us how we get ourselves. So then we actually turn up as not good enough, in the sense that dramas occur for us which actually show that we aren't good enough. And so something inside us goes, see, I told you, you're not good enough. And it gets more and more compounded and more compounded until that becomes something that we're quite sure about. We're not good enough. So how do we deal with this? Now, to me, I've seen that one of the ways that people deal with this, or that I have dealt with it, is to create a special. So on the one hand, you've got you're not good enough, there's something wrong, but on the other hand, you're really special. Now, where does that special come from? You see, it is true that there is something special about you. You've got unique gifts, and your clear self, your higher self, not the psychological self, your high, clear, the self, has all kinds of gifts and capacities and wonders, and they're not even fixed or limited. They can keep coming. So what we do is we steal our true gift from the self, and we bring it down onto the psychological level, and we use it to create special in order to balance out not good enough. We have, it is true, we have gifts, we are special, we have wonders. They're supposed to be left there. They're supposed to be used from a conscious place. But we don't. We cash them in, we bring them down onto the psychological level, and we use it to balance out not being good enough. What's the result of this? Well, we fluctuate between feeling not good enough and special. Now, the thing about using your special gift as a psychological strategy to balance out not being good enough is that it doesn't really work. You never get the fullness of it. You get about 20% of what that gift could be if it was authentically expressed and not used as a strategy. So then that proves that you're not good enough again. So you're not good enough influences everything. You're not good enough to be special, even though you get that you are special. You're not good enough to have relationships. You're not good enough for prosperity. You're not good enough for anything. As long as you're not good enough, it seems to infect everything. So the first thing we have to get is, are we doing this? What is your special? What's your special? You're specially what? Perhaps you're specially beautiful. Perhaps you're specially caring. Perhaps you're specially kind. Perhaps you're specially clever. What's your special? Can you own it? Can you find it now? What is your special? You're specially what? And this, it's good to find it. If you find it, then you can start recognizing this dynamic. And once it's exposed, because you don't do it consciously, but once it's exposed, then its game is kind of over. And perhaps you can return your special to where it should be. And then success will come out from it, because you'll be expressing it from the place that it's for, not as a psychological thing. So what is I'm special? People think, you know, a great musician, he's really talented, but because he's run by I'm not good enough, he's not good enough to be successful. Yet he counteracts that by thinking, but I'm really special. I know I'm really special musician. I've really got it. And of course there's consequences to that. When you're special, going around being special, everybody else has to be less than in order for your special to have any kind of currency. If everybody was special, special would have no value. Special is a relative thing. I'm special relative to you in this arena or in that talent with that way of expressing. And so people who are special, who go around projecting special, find themselves increasingly isolated. And eventually they get stabbed in the back. There are even, through history, groups of people, nations even, who have projected themselves as special. But it hasn't helped. They've been, they haven't had a good history. People have hated them for it. And it's exactly the same with us. Because our special is a delusion. In exactly the same way as the idea that we're not good enough is a delusion. It's only true when seen within a certain context. And it's not a universal context. I used to think my special was that I'm better than everybody. Literally, in my 20s when I used to take acid, I would feel not good enough, and say in a room with people, I'd feel not good enough and insecure, and then this balancing agent of super special would come in. But they didn't get me as super special. It was a place that I went to when I felt not good enough. And it was an abuse of my true specialness. So it's about authenticity. It's about being who you actually are, not using these qualities as a psychological strategy. So figuring out what your special is not difficult if you're honest, because you think about it quite often. And then can you see how it is a balancing strategy or a counteracting strategy for feeling not good enough? And can you then see also that you're not good enough is not a fact about you? Even though you've appeared to yourself as not good enough, it's not actually true that you're not good enough. How, in what context is it true that you're fine? The context that it's true that you're fine is if you look deeper, if you look beyond the psychological self. The psychological self is full of these complexes. Things happen to us when we're young, and also traumatic things happen when we're older, but we're a little more wise when we're older perhaps, and we create meanings about ourselves and about life. Say we have a relationship as a teenager that goes terribly wrong. The meaning we might give it is, I don't have all the software for relationships. Oh, relationships just don't work for me. Or we might give the meaning, pain is bad, relationships are pain. And that meaning, which is like a conversation inside our head, gathers momentum until it becomes strong enough to actually create results in the dream of our life, which prove the thought we're holding about ourselves right. So the psychological self is full of these kind of delusions. Delusions about how clever we are. Delusions about how spiritual we are. Delusions of grandeur. Delusions, ideas we hold about ourselves that actually aren't so, or are so, but only if you see it from this context, some tiny little context. And this is all because we really don't know who we are. As we recognize the self, or as we recognize that which is beyond the psychological self, that which listens to us think, the observer, the witness of our states of consciousness, the witness of our thoughts, the witness of our emotions and feelings, the witness of our life dramas, the witness of our psychological self. As we go back into that and become more attuned to that and surrender to that and start to live as that, then the psychological self starts to crumble and to disassemble, and mechanisms within it that were running us, driving us, become exposed to the conscious mind. They're clearly, consciously witnessed, and their power starts to diminish. And the more time we spend in presence, the less gullible we are to the machinations of the psychological self, and it starts to crumble, it starts to collapse, and there's no going back from that. Once you've seen the psychological self as an object, once you've been able to look at it as an object, not from inside it, but from outside of it, you objectify it, you realize, my God, it's an object. Like my hand is an object. I'm not my hand, I'm looking at it. Same with the psychological self. Then you're on the path to your fast track to freedom. Because what's looking at it actually is freedom. So seeing these things can be enough to begin a process of their dissolution. This idea of special, the ego. This is the domain of the ego we're talking about. As it becomes exposed, it falls away. As our awareness grows, our consciousness, awakeness grows, we can see more and more of its workings and disentangle ourselves from that. We recognize that actually all this thinking and internal chatter and judging and evaluating and commentating that goes on is all to support the psychological self. And we are the ones that are observing it. Being the observer in any moment immediately brings clarity, immediately brings peace, immediately brings joy. But those things are something that actually I am. To start with, I look at peace. I look at joy. But as I let myself unfold into it more and more and more, I realize actually I can dissolve any sense of myself. I can dissolve into that peace. I'm safe to surrender completely into that awareness, into that suchness, into that clarity. I actually am that. And the delusion was that I thought I was this ego self. It seemed so real. But in fact, of course, as that clarity builds, it's just seen as a delusion, as ignorance. Ignorance, ignoring the self. The consequences are that you build a false one. And in pretty much every case, that false self has got the feeling inside of it, this, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong. Because fundamentally there is something wrong. You're attending to something, you're building something that's not actually the best thing that you could be spending your time with. And that will lead to suffering. The unconscious drives our life. And that's why it needs to be exposed. If you know, there's people who like, I met this person the other day who like, quite an awake person, and they said, oh, I hate gurus. I hate teachers, gurus. I hate them. I hate them. They're always doing this. They're always, you can't trust them. They're like this and that and this. And I was thinking, that's like such an intense feeling. Where does it come from? And of course that is that person didn't know the source of her hard feelings, because it was unconscious to her. But it was extreme. Anything extreme is a key. Any extreme feelings we have about things if we follow them back, will reveal something in the psychological self. We want to see everything as it is, without our filters and our ignorance projected on it. What does it all look like when we see it as it is? My view of myself fluctuates from not good enough to super special. Without those filters, if I could put that down, how would I see myself? Who would I actually be? Who am I, really? And that's the question. Am I a set of qualities? No. Am I my past, whom the past says I am? No. Am I who other people say I am? No. Am I who I think I am? Is that it? No. Am I my opinions and thoughts? Is that what defines me? No. So who am I? Am I my characteristics? No. Am I my gifts and talents? No. Am I my specialness? No. So who am I? And the answer is astonishing, because when we look, and really look, we won't find anything. Just awareness that takes the shape of the simple sense I am. And there's nothing that follows the am. It's simply I am. What a relief. Maintaining specialness is a big job, isn't it? What happens if you say you're special and you find and a situation arises that proves you're not? Oh, you plunge back into not good enough, failed again. Constantly living in fear and anxiety about how people see me and what will come of it. And this is life inside the psychological self. Having very strong opinions because I identify as the one who thinks this way. Is that who I am? Who you are, who I am, causes no problem. So if who you think you are causes any problem in any department, then it's not who you are. Everybody today has such strong opinions about everything because we're all so uncertain. People argue. I found myself thinking the other day, somebody had changed their mind about Trump. Before they were against him, now they were for him. And I actually experienced myself thinking, well, I don't know how I want to associate with them anymore. I go, what the what is that? And this kind of division comes when we identify with who we're not. So we can take apart bit by bit the psychological self. We can have a look at different issues like this whole dynamic of not good enough, super special. And that can be relatively helpful. But the real cure is to put the whole thing, is to objectify it and put the whole thing down as one. And then just for moments and extended moments, experience who you actually are, this pure and wonderful presence. And that will trigger an awakening process that's waiting to get activated within you. And once that activation happens, part of that is a disentanglement from the psychological self, which then, as you've now objectified it, is much easier to sort out and accept and have insights about and let it fall away. Not really a problem. We don't arrive at the self by fixing the psychological self. Constant self-assessment, psychologically speaking, is not the way to awakeness. It's the way to, well, you do it, you know. We don't have to do that. That isn't the path. The path is the remembrance of presence, the remembrance of the gift of life, surrendering to the experience of this moment. There aren't bad moments. Bad things happen in the drama of our lives, but no moment is bad. There's never a point where the light turns off. There's never a point where the light turns off. The true light. In the drama, there's light and darkness. In the truth, there's just unchanging light. Doesn't fluctuate, doesn't grow, doesn't diminish, isn't more in one place than another, isn't more in one time than another. This is the profound, deepest, ultimate truth. We have access to that. We can dissolve into that. Just by becoming present. And the more we become present, we become confident in the present, in the presence, which allows us to dissolve more and more into it until we let go altogether. And there is the shimmering, natural, unchanging state. It's not really a state. It's just what is. And there we're home. That's victory. So, I hope that was helpful. I'm doing these every day at 9:30. I hope you'll join me tomorrow. I'm putting these up on my YouTube channel, Timian Talks. I also offer one-to-one sessions on a donation basis. You can do it online or in real life. So, have a truly wonderful day, regardless of what's going on, regardless of your feelings, your thoughts, and the drama you're in. Behind that, prior to that, is the witness, is the observer, is the simple sense I am, your heart. Coming from there will assure you have the most beautiful day.